Prom night was supposed to be the one event that tied together my last year of high school in a way that felt magical, something I could look back on and smile about, even when the rest of senior year had been stressful and overwhelming. For weeks, I had been telling myself that as long as I had the dress, the date, and the pictures, nothing could really go wrong. I thought that at least for one evening, everything would fall into place, and I could just let myself enjoy being 17 without overthinking what was going to happen after graduation. My best friend, Nora, had been buzzing about it for months, planning every tiny detail down to her earrings and the exact shade of lipstick she was going to wear. She was the kind of person who thrived on making things perfect, while I was the type who thought I could just wing it, and sometimes that worked out, but prom night wasn't going to be one of those times. My date was Aaron, someone I had known for years, but only recently started talking to in a way that went beyond casual small talk. He wasn't the most popular guy in school, but he was well-liked, always friendly, and the kind of person teachers trusted to help set up events. A lot of people thought we were a strange match, mostly because I was quieter, kept to my small circle, and didn't really put myself out there much, while Aaron was more outgoing and seemed to know everybody. Still, when he asked me to prom, it felt like the safe choice. I didn't expect fireworks, but I thought at least the night would be comfortable, maybe even fun. My parents had made a big deal out of it, insisting on 100 photos in the living room before Aaron even arrived, and I tried to smile through it, though inside I was more nervous than excited. The kind of nervousness that didn't come from fear, but from an odd sense that something wasn't going to go the way I imagined. At the time, I brushed it off as typical pre-prom jitters, the same kind everyone probably felt, but later I would realize that my instincts were already warning me. When Aaron showed up, he looked sharp, his tie matching the pale blue of my dress, which Nora had convinced me to buy because she said it made me look like I belonged in some fairy tale. He was polite with my parents, charming in the way he always knew how to be, and for a few minutes I thought maybe I had been overthinking. Maybe the night really would be the memory I wanted it to be. We took more pictures at Nora's house, where her date, Marcus, was already waiting. Marcus was older, in college, and had this confidence about him that made everyone else look like they were still figuring out how to stand up straight. Nora looked like she was walking on air next to him, and I couldn't help but feel a little envious, even though I would never admit it to her. The four of us rode together, Aaron cracking jokes from the passenger seat while Marcus drove, and Nora and I exchanged looks that said we were both pretending not to be as nervous as we really were. By the time we pulled up to the hotel ballroom where prom was being held, the parking lot was already packed with cars, and the buzz of excitement made it hard not to get swept up in the energy. Inside, the decorations looked beautiful, lights strung across the ceiling like stars, tables covered in silver and navy, and a huge arch of balloons framing the dance floor. Everyone was dressed to impress, and for a moment, I felt like maybe this was going to be one of those perfect movie-like nights after all. But then, little things started to shift, things I didn't pay enough attention to in the beginning. Aaron kept drifting away from me, stopping to talk to people every few minutes, while Marcus stayed glued to Nora's side in a way that made her glow. I tried to be understanding, telling myself that Aaron was just social, but the longer it went on, the more I felt like an afterthought. When the slow song started, he danced with me once, said something about grabbing drinks, and then disappeared for almost 20 minutes. I stood there, smiling at people, pretending like I wasn't waiting, while inside the uneasy feeling I'd had earlier was turning into something heavier. Eventually, I found Nora and tried to brush it off, but she gave me that look, the one that said she knew I wasn't okay, even when I was insisting that I was fine. She tried to distract me by pulling me onto the dance floor with her, and for a little while it worked. I laughed, spun in my dress, let the music drown out my thoughts, but deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that something about this night was slipping away from me. It wasn't until much later, when I went looking for Aaron again, that I realized prom night wasn't going to just be slightly disappointing. It was going to be the kind of night that changes how you look at people forever. When I finally spotted Aaron again, it wasn't where I expected him to be. I thought he would be near the buffet table, cracking jokes with his friends, or maybe on the dance floor trying to pull me back into the mood of the night, but instead I found him near the back hallway, half hidden from the main ballroom, talking to someone in a way that looked a little too serious for casual prom chatter. The girl standing with him was Marissa, someone I only vaguely knew from my English class, the kind of person who always had a reputation for being involved in more drama than anyone else. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I had just walked in at the wrong moment, but something about their body language made me stop. Aaron was leaning in close, and though I couldn't hear what he was saying, Marissa laughed in this way that didn't sound innocent. For a split second, I considered walking over, making it clear that I had seen them, but instead I froze. I didn't want to cause a scene, not here, not tonight, so I turned back before either of them could notice me. My stomach twisted, but I told myself maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked. Maybe I was overreacting because I had already been feeling left out. I tried to shake it off and rejoin Nora and Marcus, though I barely heard what they were talking about. I kept glancing around, waiting for Aaron to come back, rehearsing in my head what I might say if he acted like nothing had happened. When he finally returned, he had 2 drinks in hand and this easy smile that made it look like he had been gone for just a couple minutes, not nearly half an hour. He handed me one of the cups and started talking about how great the decorations looked, like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't just seen him whispering with Marissa in the hallway. I nodded, tried to act normal, but inside I was distracted, my mind running circles around what I had witnessed. The night kept moving on, the music getting louder, people letting loose on the dance floor, and for a while I forced myself to play along. I laughed when Nora pulled me into group pictures, smiled when Aaron finally danced with me again, and tried to let myself believe that maybe I was overthinking. But that feeling in my gut didn't go away, and the longer I ignored it, the stronger it got. Things shifted again when the prom king and queen were announced. Everyone gathered around the stage, clapping and cheering, and the excitement almost made me forget the weird tension I was carrying. Almost. The moment the winners were crowned and the spotlight faded back into colorful flashing lights, Aaron told me he needed to go outside for some air. He said it casually, like it was no big deal, but something about the way he avoided my eyes made me hesitate before nodding. Nora caught the hesitation too, but before she could ask, Aaron was already slipping out the doors. I told myself I wasn't going to follow him. I told myself it wasn't worth it, that I should just enjoy the rest of the night with Nora, but after 10 minutes, curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out into the cooler night air, the muffled beat of the music behind me, and scanned the parking lot. At first, I didn't see him, and I almost turned back inside, but then I caught sight of movement near the far end, by the row of cars where the lights didn't quite reach. I walked closer, my heels clicking against the pavement, and my heart started to race before I even saw clearly what was happening. Aaron wasn't alone. He was with Marissa again, and this time it was obvious the conversation wasn't innocent. His hand rested against the car behind her, leaning in close, his posture making it clear she had his full attention. For a moment I just stood there, the reality of it hitting harder than I wanted it to, the perfect image of prom night I had built in my head crumbling with every second. My instinct was to walk up, demand an explanation, force the truth out of him right there, but instead I turned back before either of them noticed me. I didn't want to be the girl who caused a scene, who became the center of whispered gossip the next day at school. I went back inside, my hands shaking slightly, trying to figure out how I was going to get through the rest of the night. When Aaron returned 15 minutes later, acting like nothing had happened, I smiled and pretended to, because I needed time to process. But even as I forced myself to play along, I knew the night was heading in a direction I wasn't ready for. The part that unsettled me most wasn't even that Aaron had disappeared with Marissa, it was the way he looked at me when he came back, as if he was checking whether I had seen. That look told me he knew exactly what he was doing, and it was then I realized this wasn't just going to be a disappointing night. It was going to be something I wouldn't forget, no matter how hard I tried. I kept replaying the image of Aaron outside with Marissa in my head, and no matter how many times I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't convince myself that it was harmless. The rest of the night inside the ballroom started to feel surreal, like I was watching everything from a distance rather than living it. Nora noticed right away. She leaned in during one of the songs and whispered, "Something's wrong, isn't it?" I shook my head, forcing a smile, but she gave me the kind of look only a best friend could, the kind that cuts through every lie you're trying to tell. I couldn't bring myself to admit the truth yet. If I said it out loud, it would become real, and I wasn't ready for that. Aaron, on the other hand, seemed determined to keep up appearances. He danced with me during the upbeat songs, made little jokes, introduced me to people he thought I should know, and the more he acted like the perfect date, the more I wondered if maybe I was just imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. When dessert was served, Aaron excused himself again, claiming he needed to check something with one of his friends. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I slipped out a different door and tried to circle around the hotel, determined to catch him if he went back to Marissa. My pulse hammered in my ears as I peeked around corners and scanned the dimly lit edges of the parking lot, but this time I didn't see him. After 10 minutes of searching, I gave up and headed back inside, only to nearly bump into him coming down the hallway. He looked startled to see me, though he covered it quickly with a grin and a casual, "There you are. I was just looking for you." I forced a laugh, though my chest felt tight. I wanted to ask him directly where he had been, but something in his expression stopped me. It wasn't guilt exactly, it was more like calculation, as though he was deciding how much to tell me. And that scared me more than anything, because it meant he wasn't oblivious. He knew. The night dragged on, with couples taking pictures, teachers trying to corral everyone into group shots, and the DJ announcing the last few songs. I went through the motions, smiling when I had to, but inside I felt like I was unraveling. Nora tried to stick by me, but eventually Marcus pulled her into another slow dance, leaving me on the edge of the floor, clutching my purse and pretending I didn't care. That was when Marissa walked by. She didn't say anything, didn't even look at me, but the smirk on her face was enough. It wasn't the kind of smirk you give when you have an inside joke, it was the kind that told me she knew something I didn't. That was the breaking point. I couldn't just stand there anymore pretending everything was fine. When the last song ended and people began trickling toward the doors, I told Aaron I needed to grab my jacket from the coat check, then slipped away before he could follow. Instead of heading for my jacket, I went searching again, not sure what I expected to find, only knowing I couldn't leave the night the way it was. The hallways were quieter now, most people heading out to their cars or after parties, and the energy that had filled the ballroom was fading into exhaustion. I wandered past one of the side corridors near the staff area, where the lights were dimmer, and that was when I heard voices. I froze, pressing myself against the wall, straining to listen. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but then I recognized Aaron's voice. He was speaking low, too low for me to catch every sentence, but the tone was sharp, different from the easy charm he always showed me. Then I heard Marissa laugh again, that same laugh I had heard in the hallway earlier, only this time it carried a sharper edge, like she was taunting him. My chest tightened. I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, but I couldn't stop myself. I leaned closer, trying to catch more, and finally I heard Marissa say something that made my stomach drop. "She doesn't have a clue." My breath caught. She was talking about me. There was no mistaking it. My hands trembled as I stood there, hidden in the shadows, listening to the two of them, piecing together what little I could hear. Aaron muttered something back, his voice tense, but I couldn't make out the words. Then Marissa laughed again and said, "Don't worry, your secret's safe with me for now." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just about flirting, wasn't just some harmless prom drama. There was something else, something I wasn't supposed to know. I backed away before either of them spotted me, my heart racing, my mind spinning with possibilities. I didn't know what the secret was, but I knew one thing for certain: prom night wasn't just a disappointment anymore. It was the beginning of something much bigger, and I wasn't ready for what I was about to uncover. I left the hallway and hurried back toward the ballroom, though by then most people were already gone, their laughter echoing faintly as they spilled into the parking lot. I grabbed my jacket quickly, pretending like I was calm, but inside I was shaking. I kept hearing Marissa's voice replay in my head, "She doesn't have a clue." The way she said it was smug, like she was enjoying the fact that I was in the dark. That, paired with Aaron's tense reply, made me realize this wasn't just about him sneaking around during prom night. There was something much deeper that I was missing. When I finally stepped outside, the cool air hit me, and I saw Aaron waiting near Marcus's car. He smiled as soon as he spotted me, like nothing had happened, like we were just a normal couple heading to an after-party. Nora and Marcus were already inside the car, laughing together, their world seemingly perfect. I slid into the seat next to Aaron, forcing a smile I didn't feel. On the ride to Marcus's friend's house, the conversation in the car was light, but my thoughts were heavy. I kept sneaking glances at Aaron, wondering how someone could look so relaxed when I had just overheard something that made my stomach twist. Every time he caught me looking, he flashed me that same easy grin, the one that used to reassure me, but now only made me feel like I was being played. When we arrived at the after-party, the energy was completely different from prom. The music was louder, the atmosphere more chaotic, people crammed into every room with red cups in hand, and for a moment I thought maybe I could just blend in and push the night's events out of my mind. But I couldn't. Not when Aaron kept disappearing into different corners of the house, slipping away just long enough to make me wonder who he was with. Not when I spotted Marissa arriving 15 minutes later, her eyes scanning the crowd before locking with his. Nora tried to distract me, pulling me into the kitchen to introduce me to some of Marcus's college friends, but I couldn't focus on a single word they were saying. My mind was glued to the fact that Aaron and Marissa seemed to orbit each other, never too far apart. Eventually, I excused myself and wandered down a quieter hallway, away from the blaring music. I needed air, needed space to think. That was when I heard it again, the sound of voices, low and urgent, coming from one of the side rooms. My stomach clenched as I edged closer, pressing myself against the wall. The door was slightly open, and I could see the faint outline of two figures inside. Aaron's voice was unmistakable, sharper now, tinged with frustration. "You weren't supposed to say anything tonight," he hissed. Marissa laughed softly, but it wasn't playful, it was calculated. "Relax, I didn't. She still has no idea. But you should tell her before she finds out some other way." My heart pounded in my ears. I strained to hear more, but the music from the main room swelled, drowning out the rest. Still, those few sentences were enough to send me spiraling. Tell me what? What was it that Aaron was hiding so carefully, something Marissa clearly had leverage over? I backed away from the door before they could notice me, my hands trembling as I tried to process what I'd just heard. Every instinct in me screamed to confront him, but another part of me knew I needed more information first. If I demanded answers too soon, he'd just lie, and I wasn't going to give him that chance. I slipped back into the main area, forcing myself to smile when Nora spotted me, but I couldn't hide the tension in my voice when she asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I lied, and she narrowed her eyes like she didn't believe me, but before she could press further, Marcus pulled her onto the dance floor again. I stayed on the sidelines, my eyes scanning the crowd until I spotted Aaron returning. He walked toward me casually, like he hadn't just been in a secretive conversation with Marissa, and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Having fun?" he asked, his voice light. I nodded, but inside, my thoughts were racing. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but instead I smiled and leaned into him, deciding to wait. If he thought I was clueless, then maybe he'd slip. Maybe he'd reveal something without realizing. But as the night dragged on, I realized I wasn't going to get answers that easily. The tension between him and Marissa was like an undercurrent, invisible to most, but glaringly obvious to me. When it was finally time to leave, Aaron acted as though nothing was wrong, holding my hand as we walked back to the car. But my mind was made up. I wasn't going to let this go. Something was happening, something he didn't want me to know, and no matter how much it hurt, I was going to find out. What I didn't realize was that the truth I was chasing wasn't just about him and Marissa, it was about me too. And once it came out, prom night would be remembered for far more than just a ruined dance. The car ride back to my house was quiet, though Nora tried to keep the mood alive by talking about how much fun she had, how the night was everything she wanted. Marcus laughed along with her, adding little comments that made her glow. I sat in the back seat next to Aaron, nodding when Nora asked me something, but I wasn't really there. My thoughts kept replaying Marissa's words, her taunting laugh, the sharp way Aaron had told her not to say anything. Whatever the secret was, it wasn't small. It wasn't just some minor mistake he was embarrassed about. It was something that could ruin the image he'd worked so hard to keep up. When Marcus pulled up in front of my house, Aaron walked me to the door, his hand resting lightly on my back like he'd done 100 times that night. My parents had left the porch light on, and for a moment it felt like a scene out of some normal teenage movie, the kind where the guy kisses the girl goodnight and everything ends neatly. But instead of kissing me, Aaron hesitated. He looked at me with this searching expression, almost like he was debating whether to say something. I waited, holding my breath, but then he smiled and said, "Tonight was fun. I'll text you tomorrow." I forced a smile, said goodnight, and stepped inside, my chest heavy with everything unsaid. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every detail, every word, trying to fit the pieces together. By morning, I had made up my mind. If Aaron wasn't going to tell me, then I was going to find out myself. I texted Nora and asked her to come over, needing someone to talk to, but when she arrived, I couldn't bring myself to spill everything right away. I just told her that Aaron had been acting strange with Marissa and that I thought something was going on. Nora frowned, immediately suspicious, but she told me not to jump to conclusions. "If there's really something, you'll know soon enough," she said gently. I nodded, though her reassurance didn't calm me. The next few days at school felt unbearable. Everyone was buzzing about prom. Who had the best dress, who had the best pictures, who hooked up after, but all I could think about was Aaron. He acted completely normal, smiling at me in the hallways, sitting with me at lunch, walking me to class, and if I hadn't overheard those conversations, I might have believed him. But I had, and that knowledge made everything feel like a lie. The breaking point came 3 days later. I was walking past the library when I heard voices again. I froze when I recognized Aaron's. He was inside with Marissa, and though I couldn't hear every word, one sentence cut through clearly, "She deserves to know eventually." My heart stopped. My instincts told me to walk away, to pretend I hadn't heard, but I couldn't. I stepped closer, just enough to catch Marissa's reply. "If you don't tell her, I will. She's going to find out either way." My chest tightened. This wasn't just about him flirting at prom. This was something bigger, something that had been kept from me for a long time. When I walked into the library, both of them went silent. Aaron's face went pale, and Marissa's lips curled into that same smirk she'd worn at prom, the one that made me feel like the punchline of some cruel joke. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "What's going on?" Aaron opened his mouth, then closed it again, his jaw tightening like he was struggling with the right words. Marissa, on the other hand, looked almost excited. "You really haven't told her," she said, her eyes flicking to Aaron before landing on me. Wow. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Told me what?" I demanded. Aaron shot Marissa a look that could have burned through her, but she just leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, clearly enjoying the chaos. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out," he said finally, his voice low, tense. "But it's true. There's something I haven't told you. Something I should have said a long time ago." My stomach twisted as I braced myself for whatever was coming. Every possibility raced through my head. Was he secretly dating Marissa? Did he just use me as a cover for something else? But when Aaron finally spoke, his words weren't what I expected. "I've known you a lot longer than you think," he said carefully. "Long before prom. Long before I even asked you out." I frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" His eyes darted toward Marissa, then back at me. "It's not just me who knows. She knows too. And it's about your family." My breath caught in my throat. My family? That wasn't where I thought this was going. I stared at him, stunned, as Marissa tilted her head and said casually, "She's not who she thinks she is." Marissa didn't say a word. She simply watched, a small, knowing smile playing at the corners of her lips. When I finally looked up, I realized something important. Aaron hadn't done anything wrong during prom. None of it mattered compared to the fact that I had just learned the truth about my own family. All the jealousy, the whispers, the tension, it had been a distraction. A misdirection. The letters explained things I never even suspected, connections and secrets that made sense of years of confusing behavior, lies, and silences. I looked at Aaron, who gave me a reassuring nod. I know this isn't easy. But now you have the chance to decide what to do with it, he said quietly. Marissa finally spoke, softer than before. I wanted to see how you'd handle it. Most people crumble or lash out. You're still standing. That says a lot. I swallowed hard, my mind still racing. Prom night hadn't gone as I imagined, not even close. I hadn't danced the way I planned, hadn't laughed like everyone else, and for a while I had thought the worst part was Aaron and Marissa. But now I realized that the night had been a turning point for a different reason entirely. It had revealed truths I couldn't ignore, forced me to see the world and my life from a completely new perspective. For the first time, I felt like I could take control of my story, even if it was scary, even if it hurt. I didn't know how things would unfold with my parents or my family, or even with Aaron, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to pretend anymore. Prom night hadn't gone as planned, but maybe that was exactly what I needed. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the distant sounds of post-prom laughter still echoing, and for the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe. The world was bigger than I had known, the truths harder than I had imagined, but I was ready to face them. And somehow, that made everything. The dress, the awkward dances, the secrets, the lies feel like it had been worth it.